So everyone's been talking about Trench Crusade, even us. We did a video on the basics of Trench Crusade and what you need to know about it earlier on the channel. Check it out, cards up here. But today I'm going to be seeing if our new miniatures, the Kindred of the Abyss, can be, well, kitbashed into Trench Crusade. You see, a lot of people reached out and said they backed our project because they want to use them in Trench Crusade as Heretic naval raiders or new Antioch who are meant to counter those submariners. So I thought, well, what can we do? Let's try throwing some stuff together, and I'm going to make two models. I'm going to make one new Antioch loyalist who fights in the seas against those Heretic submariners, and then I'm gonna make one of those submariners himself. And then when I'm done all that, I'm gonna go to Japan, drink sake, eat in izakayas while Murray paints them up. It's tabletop time. So the first model I'm going to tackle is a new Antioch yeoman. Now in the lore for new Antioch, you can basically create your own little factions that have come along and fought for new Antioch from all over the world. Faithful nations send their forces there, so there's a little bit of room for nuance. Whereas the Trench Pilgrims are more religious and covered in iconography, they're more peasantry that is fighting on the front. Forces from new Antioch are a lot more military in nature and structure. And I think that suits the models I'm using as the basis for these. I'm picturing these as a faithful squad of soldiers from a sect of the church that are trying to put together some answer to those Heretic submariners. And the first thing to start here is a era accurate weapon, so I'm choosing a bolt action rifle. First major change to this model is I'm going to be swapping the head. I really like our Kindred heads for the Heretic submariners, but I want something a little different. So I'm going for this Max Mini Murmillo helm that I have laying around in a bits box. This resin head actually fits really well with a bit of green stuff just to space out the neck. When converting entire warbands, I don't want to go completely wild. I'm not going to freehand green stuff entire massive conversions to every single soldier. So for this example soldier, I'm going to try and focus on using bits that can be easily glued on. A simple option here is to use a shovel from the Death Core of Krieg kit. They have shovels that are nicely contained in pouches, so I can glue one upside down on the belt as they would have been worn by trench soldiers in World War I. And to add another piece onto this model, I grabbed the Bretonnian Knights on foot kit, and I'm taking a little reliquary from the back here. This has a symbol of a lady, maybe it's the Virgin Mary, maybe it's some kind of Meta Mary. I don't know, Trench Crusade has some wild lore. But either way, it's a piece of religious iconography he can carry with him. For one more finishing touch, I create a little rope of green stuff and then sculpt out a rough wooden symbol. This symbol has a cross etched into it, and I also do a little loop of ribbon at the top where it connects onto the string that it's held onto his neck with. This one major religious symbol on the character is a nod to him belonging to the faithful, but isn't over the top in the way the Trench Pilgrims would be. And with my new Antioch soldier rough together, I can move on to my Heretic submariner. Heretics land a lot closer to home, so I need to pick another era accurate weapon for the Heretic submariner. So I'm gonna grab this awesome early prototype SMG. SMGs and bolt action rifles are some of the more common war gear in Trench Crusade that a lot of your soldiers will be armed with. And this SMG I think is perfect. But those who've been following the Kindred of the Abyss campaign that we run on Backer Kit might have noticed something odd. Wait a minute, I didn't know you had an SMG and a bolt action rifle. Well, these are concept pieces that have been sculpted by Jack's Jewel at Golden Dragon Games for the express purpose of seeing what it would look like if we put together a pack of bits to make it easier for people to kit bash their models for games like Trench Crusade. So these new weapons are samples of one of our new stretch goals. If we hit it, we'll develop this out and create multiple poses for the different types of infantry. We'll add in a bunch of iconography that would be appropriate for zealots of any kind. We're calling it the Zealot Pack, and of course, this is merely to help people kitbash. A huge amount of our supporters want these models for the Kindred for use in Trench Crusade, so we figured we should make a bunch of bits that make that easier for you. So if you want to back and support and try and help us reach that stretch goal, make sure to check out the links in the description. We are in the final days of the campaign. It would be amazing to get it there. But now that I've shown you the SMG and I've shown you the bolt action rifle, I'm going to go ahead and use them. This vicious little SMG is perfect for our Heretic submariner. SMGs in World War I were of course brand new technology, mostly experimental. And while Trench Crusade has an alternate history timeline, I like to think that this is the kind of the weapon your advanced operatives would get. It's a vicious silhouette and I choose a running pose, going with the Kindred spiky helm. Now, our Kindred are already meant to look pretty vicious, so they naturally fit well as Heretic submariners. But I do want to add a few more touches. You see, our models there for our system, and they really aren't perfect for Trench Crusade. Trench Crusade has so much dark World War I aesthetic, as well as a bunch of religious iconography, so we need to add a little bit here. Now, a little fun fact here is the early rudimentary diving suits, the way they operated with air in these big helmets, meant that they actually had quite a lot of buoyancy, so to stay on the bottom of the seafloor, they needed to use weights. And what a perfect weight I can find in this Chaos sigil from the old Chaos Space Marine vehicle kit. I imagine this large piece of brass on this character's back, so I'm gonna glue him here and chain it on. This allows the Submariner to stay at the bottom of the ocean in his dive suit, and when he's ready to come out, he can of course detach the chains, drop the weight, drop the icon, leave a little bit of hell's love in the ground, and then move into his combat zone. And while that anchor of a brass weight is pretty much enough for him, I do want to add one more bit. There's this gnarly ghoul arm in one of the Warhammer Underworlds warbands that looks like it's been gnawed a little bit. So I'm going to cut this off here and add a little strap of leather that he's attached to his waist. Right here, there's a small fishing net, and I think it's a perfect place for him to have caught his catch of the day, which is a human arm. Because the heretics in Trench Crusade are pretty horrible, so I can imagine them doing something like this. Overall, these two quick conversions were really simple, and I think have showed off how quickly and easily you can convert our models into some great models for Trench Crusade. But really, it's all gonna come down to what's in the paint job, and I have a feeling Murray is gonna do a fantastic job creating a really dark, evil heretic submariner and painting up a loyalist of New Antioch. But that's gonna be all from me because I have a honeymoon to enjoy. All right, see you all in a couple of weeks.
You heard right, Dave's gone, and now losing it to a simple game of paper, rock, scissors, Jen was the one who got to go on the honeymoon to Japan with Dave, so I'm gonna have to settle for actually just painting his miniatures. I'm going to paint this up with the New Antioch and Heretic Legions. So we've got a good guy versus bad guy situation going on, and I'm gonna see, what sort of cool narrative paint jobs I can do here. Now, New Antioch has this really cool sort of like dirty jade fatigues sort of vibe, but they have these really cool red, lacquered, blood red helmets. And that's really cool, and I want to see if I can incorporate that. And then on the other side, we've got the Heretic Legion, whose favorite color apparently is mud. So I'm gonna see what I can work with there and make them all cool. Maybe I'll go with a lacquered black armor for them. That could be really cool. Have some really nice shininess to them. They'll look like beetles or something. It'll be weird. So that is my plan. So it's time to sit down and start painting. Now, as I said before, I'm going to be painting this first lad up in the colors of New Antioch, one of the religious goody two-shoes factions in this world. More specifically, I'm going to be painting him as one of the yeomen, basically a rifleman, as it were. So I'm going to go with that faded jade color for the fatigues, and I'm going to take a bit of inspiration from the stormtroopers, which have a bit more of a metal armor, because I don't want to just have the jade on everything, as some of the artwork depicts. I want to mix it up just a little bit, a bit of variance. And of course, speaking of variance, I'm absolutely going to go for the blood red lacquered helmet. Now, the first thing I decided is that I don't want to have too much saturation. In fact, I specifically want to tone it down quite a lot because I want that red helmet to be so striking and vivid at the end. So I'm going to make sure that I mix a whole lot of cold neutral colors with the jade, lots of off greens and terracotta creams that will really lower the value and saturation of the jade and make it just a little more dirty and really blend into this world. Now, as I go about base coating all the parts of the model to really establish where I want all the colors and the contrasts to be, I'm not gonna go and do anything too wild with any underpainting or anything. I'm gonna keep with the dark green, but really what I'm gonna do is blend on some really nice heavy washes and weathering to do a lot of the heavy lifting and result in a really manky and forlorn looking individual. But of course, he will be positively resplendent next to the next individual, who we will of course get to later, but it's important to establish the fact that I'm going to use, say, brighter metals for this one than of the more heretical fellow, as I think it's really important to thematically distance two factions if they're going to be polar opposites. Even their clothes and metals should be visually polar opposites as well, as that lends a lot to the narrative storytelling you can put in your miniatures. Now, this brown wash is going to go over literally everything on the model. In fact, I might put a second coat on some areas, particularly the leathers, which I might even introduce some black into the wash. Then once that's completely dry, I'm going to go back and pick out some of the colors that I really want to stand out a bit more, particularly the cloth and highlighting some of the leather. And then of course the red metal helm, which after that brown wash looks actually fantastic and has even dried slightly gloss, which I am absolutely going to keep. Then I'll start throwing some mud onto the base. And it's looking just a little bit sparse there, so I'm going to stick in a little toothpick. It'll dry into the mud, and then I'll give that a wash as well. Make it look like some collapsed trenching or picketing. And there we have it. We have finished our new Antioch yeoman. But of course, we are only halfway done, and it is time to be a bit more heretical. Yes, that's right, it is now time to paint the Heretic so we can get properly messy with this one. What I want to do here is create a lot of depth in this character, so I'm going to go with lots of layers of paint, which is going to represent sort of years of wear and weather, and all this grunge that's going to get caked on his armor, wiped off, replaced with more grunge, more ick, more fluids, all of them horrible things. It's just going to end up with this nasty undertone that I want to carry through all of the armor. He's going to be colored not just with rust, but tetanus itself and all these horrible, nasty deeds as well. And so naturally, when I start throwing washes on this, I'm basically going to do wet blending, but with washes. Using a really off orange, green, and a dark brown, I'm just going to mix these around, sort of stippling them together, and I'm going to end up with this really weird patchy colored effect that will look really nice both on the armor, but also on all the cloth. And by really nice, I mean actually quite horrific and repugnant. And then when that's done, I'm going to start with extra stipplings of brown onto the armor to really elevate that away from the rest of the materials and create that rust effect. And then of course, I'm going to finish it off by dry brushing some silver onto it, as this is going to be all the areas that have rubbed and scratched off on everything to actually reveal the metallic surface underneath. And I'm going to move back and forth between applying more browns and doing some more washes just to give the metal even more impact. And I'm not going to stop that until I'm truly happy with how different it is from the rest of the model. Then, when I'm finally happy with that, I'm going to start highlighting all the cloth, and I'm going to go for this really off fleshy color, which is going to continue some of the tones of the paint that's underneath all the wash, and also to really emphasize that sort of yuck feel when you look at this guy. I don't want anyone to look at this model and think, oh yes, that is quite the nice uniform he has under there. No, I want you to look at him and go, ugh, he needs a bath. And Jesus. But he's not getting Jesus because he's fallen to Satan. Now, one of my final tasks for this model is to actually bring out some of the character, some of the unique individualistic aspects of this particular character. And I'm going to start with the severed arm that he just happens to be carrying by his side. Clearly, this guy took the job description too close to heart when it said man-at-arms. And so I'm going to paint this like it's been hanging off him for actually quite a while. So it's going to go for a real sort of rotten pallid look. Lots of pale colors and grays. And then I'll finish off the top with some nasty washes to give it that, let's say, a bit of a pussy blood look. Tasty. After that, I want to start working on the lenses, and what better color for evil is red. I want to give just the hint of red glowing behind all this soot and grime caked on the lens. So this is going to be really subtle, but just enough to draw attention to the face. Then for the final touches, I'll draw this little squiggle star that the primary schoolers used to draw, except this one's upside down, and you know, people who draw things upside down are up to no good. Looking at you, Mr. Squiggle, I'm on to you. Then I'll slap some texture paste onto this guy's base, give it a wash, a dry brush, and it's time for him to face off against his foe in the reveals. And we're done. We have the forces of New Antioch and the Heretic Legion all ready to do battle and do horrible things to each other in the name of deities and Satan? I think it's literally Satan. That is awesome. Well done, Dave. I'm going to congratulate him, even though he's not here and he didn't paint them himself. How dare he? If you're interested in looking at some of the Kindred of the Abyss yourself, the links are in the description. We'd very much appreciate it. And thank you to all of our patrons, as because of you, we could do this. And that is awesome. So thank you very much. I'm just going to wait here until Dave comes back, I guess. I'm lost without him. I've got nothing. Do you like that bit about me being upset about him going on the honeymoon and, like, yeah, create some drama? I'm kidding, I hate drama.